Hey guys, Brad from Drathrorol Games here, and welcome to yet another episode of Errata-Garasu, now on Fridays instead of Wednesdays. If this is your first time here, I highly recommend checking out our previous videos, but, all the same, this is a show where we take 5 cards that are currently on the Yu-Gi-Oh! TCG Forbidden list, and we give them a hypothetical errata so that they can hypothetically come back into the game. As you can tell by the title of the episode, this week's theme is cards that take cards out of your opponent's hand. So without any further ado, let's get started. Now I'm not gonna lie to you guys, this week's cards are probably the hardest ones I've had to come up with erratas for. I mean, these cards deal in the most broken and unfair thing you can do to your opponent in this game, and that is ripping cards from their hand. So this actually took me a while to come up with. I had to get help from friends at locals, etc., etc. But I think I finally came up with some erratas that I'm actually happy with. Starting with our first card, Confiscation. Confiscation is a normal spell card which reads as follows. Pay 1,000 life points. Look at your opponent's hand, select one card in it, and discard that card. It's a simple 1-for-1, but again, you're ripping cards out of your opponent's hand, which, if you're going first, you activate this first turn, it's a very huge and unfair disadvantage. So, here's what I came up with to kind of remedy it. Pay 1,000 life points. Look at your opponent's hand and discard one card in your opponent's hand. During the end phase of your opponent's turn after this card's effect resolves, your opponent targets one card in either player's graveyard and adds it to their hand. You can only activate one confiscation per turn. So basically, what this does is, you confiscate a card from them, but then they get that card back, or really any card from either player's graveyard. So it gives them a disadvantage to start off with, but eventually, at some point, it'll pay them back. The next card, obviously, is Confiscation's cousin, the Forceful Sentry. The Forceful Sentry is a normal spell card which reads as follows. Look at your opponent's hand. Select one card among them and return it to his or her deck. The deck is then shuffled. So, again, this is almost the exact same thing as the Forceful Sentry, except instead of making them discard, you're returning it to the deck, which is kind of even more busted because, you know, at least the graveyard, it's easier to get to. So here's the errata that I gave it. At the start of your main phase 1, look at your opponent's hand, target one card in your opponent's hand, shuffle it into the owner's deck. You can only activate one the Forceful Sentry per turn. Cards cannot be added from the main deck to your hand during the turn you use this card. So basically, you have to use this at the very start of your turn, and after you use it, you can't draw any cards, and you can't search. So, it rips a card from your opponent's hand, but it's pretty costly to do it. So, I'm pretty happy with this one, but again, let me know what you guys think, you know, how you guys would do these. I'd love to hear your thoughts. But anyway, on to the next card. Our next card is Trap Dust Shoot. Trap Dust Shoot is a normal trap card which reads as follows. Activate only if your opponent has 4 or more cards in their hand. Look at your opponent's hand, select one monster card in it, and return that card to the owner's deck. So honestly, if this card came back to 1, I don't really think anyone would use it, simply because it's a trap. And, you know, traps are slow. No one's really using all that many traps now. I mean, Solemn Judgment is like one of the most broken trap cards in this game's history. It's back at 1, and no one plays it because people just don't feel like using traps these days. So, honestly, I feel like if Trap Dust Shoot came back to 1, not many decks would play it. But if I absolutely had to give it an errata, here's what I'd do. Activate only if your opponent has 4 or more cards in their hand. Your opponent reveals one monster card in their hand and shuffles it into the owner's deck. If your opponent doesn't have a monster in their hand, discard 1 card. So basically, your opponent chooses what they send back, and it's like Mind Crush in that if they don't have what you're trying to send back, you discard a card. So there's actually a drawback to using it other than, it's a trap card. But, I'm pretty happy with this, but again, let me know your guys' thoughts, and honestly, I don't think it really needs to be errata in the first place. I mean, again, it's a trap card, I don't think anyone would use it. Konami could just unban it for a format, and if it really is busted, they can just ban it again. So, those are just my thoughts. On to the next card. Now we move on to the only monster in this week's episode, Topologic Gumblar Dragon. Not gonna lie, this was incredibly hard for me to come up with. Like, how do you even do anything to this? What was Konami thinking when they made this? Why would they make this in this day and age when so many of these cards are already banned, and then you just make this? Just why? Just why? But anyway, supposedly this was supposed to be hard to get off, but link spamming and all that. But anyway, so what does it do? Topologic Gumblar Dragon is a Link 4 Dark Cyberse monster with 3000 attack, with an effect that reads as follows. It requires 2+ effect monsters for materials. If another monster is special summoned to a zone a Link monster points to while this monster is on the field, discard 1 or 2 random cards. Then your opponent discards the same number. If this card is extra linked, and your opponent has at least 1 card in their hand, you can make your opponent discard 1 or 2 cards, whichever is higher. Then, if they have no cards in their hand, inflict 3000 damage to them. You can only use 1 Topologic Gumblar Dragon effect per turn, and only once that turn. So again, this was incredibly busted. You're able to rip like 4 cards out of your opponent's hand before they're even able to do anything. And it was just so broken and absurd. And again, why did Konami make this? But anyway, after much deliberation and a few suggestions, I think I've got something. If another monster is special summoned to a zone this card points to, discard 1 or 2 random cards. Then your opponent discards the same number. You cannot special summon monsters for the rest of the turn after you activate this effect. If this card is extra linked and your opponent has at least 1 card in their hand, you can make your opponent discard 1 card. Then, if they have no more cards in their hand, inflict 3000 damage to them. You can only use 1 Topologic Gumblar Dragon effect per duel, and only once that duel. So, instead of making each effect a hard once per turn, and you can only use 1 effect in each turn, you can only use 1 effect per duel. So essentially you have to make a decision as to which effect is better for the situation that you're summoning this in. And additionally, each effect is kind of nerfed somewhat. For the first effect, you can't special summon monsters after you activate the effect, and then for the other effect, it's only 1 card that you have the option of doing. So, it's pretty nerfed. I hope you guys are satisfied with this one. This one was honestly the hardest out of any of these, but anyway, let me know in the comments what you guys would do. But let's move on to our final card. Our final card is Delinquent Duo. Delinquent Duo is a normal spell card that reads as follows. Pay 1000 life points. Your opponent discards 1 random card, and if they have any other cards in hand, discard 1 more card of their choice. So obviously this is the most famous and or infamous card in this week's episode, and you can see why. It's an easy +1. You just pay 1000 life points and your opponent loses 2 cards. and there isn't really anything they can do about it. Sure, one is of their choice and the other's random, but, it's... Oy. But anyway, so here's what I did to change it. At the start of your main phase 1, pay 1,000 life points and discard 2 cards. Your opponent discards 1 random card, and if they have any other cards in hand, discard 1 more card of their choice. So basically, you have to activate this at the very beginning of your turn, and it's a -1. You spend 3 cards to get rid of 2 of your opponents. So, honestly, that would make this not really worth running, but at the same time, it's kind of in the spirit of Delinquent Duo, because, both of you are discarding 2 cards, but I don't know. Let me know what you guys would have done to this, but, that's the best I got for it. And with that ends this week's episode of Errata-Garasu. Join us next week when we cover infamous cards from the Zodiac format. So like if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, and leave a comment down below as to how you would errata these cards, as well as cards that you would like to see in future episodes. But with that, I'm Brad from Drathrorol Games, and I will see you all next time. Bye!